Where like, I remember this one lady, she was in so much body armor, I thought it was a bomb suit. And she was back in the chow hall and they were talking about they just went out to one of the gates. And one of these side gates, you have your inner layer checkpoint, you kind of have a safety barrier, and you have your outer checkpoint where the young Marines are in harm's way directly. And she had went to the inner one and was telling all of her friends at the lunch table about how, exciting and crazy and scary it was. And I'm like, man, every day, multiple days a week, we're out there every day doing stuff. And like, so their perception and perspective of that war experience is going to be vastly different from you and I. And then when that story gets told, you got to remember to look at the story under the lens of the person saying it and their experience. And so that's why I was asking you about your location and the stuff because as soon as you said where you're at, I was like, oh yeah. And then I realized, oh, wait a second, there's a lot of things going on over there. So my previous view over there was always peacetime and, food, drinks, going out. Like it was peaceful and pleasurable. Whereas now probably not so much, a little bit more hectic. We're like,
I want to say thank you so much. This is Trevor Fortner. So gracious to come on the podcast. The world sees the chaos that's going around right now, and both of us have trouble scheduling between those. So this was in the works for a while, and we're finally making it
I
happen.
appreciate it.
And very, very excited about this. So I'd just like to give you a few moments to introduce yourself, what you've done, your experience, and whatever you can get into that you're doing now before we get into some very poignant questions about what's going on today.
Thank you. Really appreciate the scheduling deconfliction and the honor to be here and speak with you. My background, if you would look at my resume, it's not a typical linear resume of high school, college, 20, 30-year career in a particular industry or company. I started out with 12 years in the Navy. First couple of years, I was just in regular Navy out on a fleet ship over in Japan area and then ended up going into the EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal, Special Operations community. Became a Navy diver and bomb technician. Started working with SEAL teams and Green Beret units, doing more of the counterterrorism type of things. So it kind of took me away from what I was doing, diving on ordnance, some things that are going to go on in the Gulf, into more of an IED, chemical biological response type of capability. Right in the early stages of the global war on terrorism, I had became a single father and I opted to get out of the Navy and do contracting work so that I could just go away, work 2 to 3 months, make some money, come back, spend time with my kid, and not have to do the single parenting like day to day. Did that for a couple of years. I say that and it sounds bad. It wasn't like I love being a father, but at the time, my mentality was still pretty young of being a patriot and I had a job to do. And my sister and mom had offered to watch my daughter while I was deployed. And so stay in the military, go do a 6 month workup cycle, 12-month deployment cycle, so 18 months away from home, or go spend 2 to 3 months away from home, a month home, and repeat that. That it was an easy choice. So I did that for a couple of years and then ended up transitioning over to the Defense Threat Reduction Agency out of Washington, D.C., where we did counter weapons proliferation. Took a hiatus, moved out to Australia to open up a CrossFit gym and chill out for a little bit, and ended up networking a position with United Arab Emirates for their Presidential Guard as an instructor and advisor. Did that for about 4 years. And then recently, well, 7 years ago, I started working for Raytheon Missiles Defense, where I work now.
Now, I always thought that you talk about not a non-linear resume, their career there, and I always thought I had the most non-linear in the things that I have done. But you have definitely run the gamut. I can't top that one. Working for DITRA, then going out on your own in Australia. So when you talk about, we had started out, and you talk about leaving and going create experiences, that is not coming from someone who has not done it. That is coming from someone who's actually lived those experiences.
Yeah, 100%. And it's still, I don't want to say it's a pain in my butt right now because I still have this desire to go travel and explore more places. There's so many more places that are on my bucket list to go and compare and experience culturally that I'm trying to find that work-life balance where I can step away from a career for a little bit and still go take my children and travel to those places while I'm still able to, but still be a patriot and provide value and services to whether it's a corporation or a consulting firm. I still want to be actively engaged in the community to some degree. And then selfishly, I still want to go show my children the world.
Yeah, I have the exact same mindset. I want to travel all over. I'm afforded that opportunity every once in a while, but with a job and working each and every day, it's tough to do.
It
But
is.
it's funny that you keep saying, "I want to be a patriot. I want to be a patriot." And I think a lot of times we just think of that while we are in uniform, right? I put on a uniform. I put on, my combat gear, and I went out and I put rounds down range. You've done that. We've both participated in that. But you're also talking about this sort of defense contracting world where you're either helping create munitions, helping create various aerial vessels, or you're building naval vessels, or you're providing intelligence or security in some manners. And I don't think we talk about that a lot as a community, because you still sacrifice time with your family in order to, like you said, be a patriot.
Yeah, there's some people, engineers that I work with, and one of them, we were having this conversation about what it is that we're actually doing. And I had to remind them, like the particular project that I'm currently working on, it is a kinetic project. And I said, you understand, like you, the software, SME, the software you're developing, you, the mechanical, developing my hardware infrastructure, said, you guys are participating, contributing to, I don't want to say the death of someone else, but it can result in that. We're using it as a defense capability, as to defend ourselves. However, in order to defend, sometimes somebody else loses their life. And I'm just curious if you guys understand that. And the majority of the younger engineers were flabbergasted. They were like, we never thought about that. Like, I'm a software person, I'm working on this program. They need this to do X. So I program that. And I take satisfaction in seeing my program do the job it's been asked to do. Ended up actually having one person resign and went and worked for, I think they went and worked for Tesla to work on cars, automated cars, because they felt that was more in line with their moral compass. And I totally get that and respect it, especially that they recognized it. Doesn't mean that they're not a patriot. And so I try to tell people the patriot, to your point, isn't about the flag on my shoulder that I'm in uniform. Like we're American citizens by birth. If you don't want to be an American citizen, leave and go to another country. Like it's that simple. But if you're going to recognize yourself as any nationality from anywhere in the world, even where you're at right now, I see that there's more patriotism in other countries that are less developed than the US, and they're patriotic to their flag and to their equivalent of our constitution and to their people. And it's not about violence, it's not about war, it's about their culture and their community and surviving, making that evolve. Whereas in America, to your point, people say patriotism, they're thinking of, yeah, the flag, but there's always that military combat attached to it, not just a local lady in the community that teaches kids how to sew, how to knit, how to can food, and how just to be well-behaved, disciplined human beings. Like that's still patriotism. And unfortunately, I don't see a lot of that in the US right now.
I think it's an excellent way to frame it. Patriotism is providing value to your community. And I see that all over the world. Like we've both been in so many different countries. Sometimes forced, sometimes we chose to be there. But in each of those countries, we've always interacted with people who were patriotic towards their country. Look, we see it. The World Cup is coming up, right? And you're going to see patriotism when you watch the World Cup. I am in a place where it is going to be absolutely chaotic during the World Cup because
Yeah,
of the sheer amount of patriotism that they feel towards their football team, right? And so it's not just putting on a uniform and being violent. It's about appreciating where the life that you were given, where you were born. And I've heard people talk about like, how are you going to, be proud of a place that you were forced to be a part of? But I always try to reframe it like, we were born in America. Other people were born in Spain or the UK or Mexico, and it's a privilege no matter where you were born that you live each and every day. And we should try to provide value to those places that we come from.
absolutely. My funnest place, favorite place to watch the World Cup is actually in the UAE, either in Dubai or Abu Dhabi. All the expats, all the local nationals, like you said, like being inside of a facility where the big screens are up and you're watching that, it's not so much for me to watch the sports, it's to watch the environment and how much people from different colored shirts and they're hugging each other and they're ragging on each other. And it's just such an amazing environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I was in Burkina Faso when they were part of the African League Championships, and they were going against countries like Gabon, which are much higher level, and just like the sheer energy that you
Mhm.
see in a country like
Yeah.
that is definitely on the poorer side of countries, but they did not care. They were just
Nope.
proud of the nation that they were a part
Yeah.
of.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So it's uh, incredible experiences, and so some of the things that I would like to get into for today. We took a kind of a turn there because I really wanted to get into that comment about patriotism because I found that fascinating. But getting kind of back to that, and we talk about like this putting on the uniform. We put on the uniform and then taking that uniform off, and now we are doing something else. I'd like to get your thoughts on, because I have my own thoughts, but I'd like to get your thoughts on that transition from like, formal military structures, right? To this, you're gonna form up, you're gonna do all of these things to like what that private military contracting was like. How was that transition?
Yeah. Um, I will start by saying my initial view of it is not my current view, and I'm still kind of processing what my current view is, right? So initially, a lot of life events and changes going on as I was leaving the service, and chose to go to a couple of contract companies, the latter one being Blackwater. And so when I arrived in Baghdad with Blackwater, it was only, weeks before that I was wearing a uniform. Two of the guys on my Blackwater team were former teammates of mine. One current teammate that had just gotten out of the military as well. And so now in a 10 or 12 man unit, three of us had previously spent the last 3 to 4 years together in the Navy. And all good?
Yeah, all good.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
I wasn't sure if you could hear me there. And then, so that was a really interesting thing because I'm still with my teammates. We're just not in military uniform. And we had been used to sometimes doing operations or particularly surveillance not in military uniforms. And we used to get this, they started out with like this, I think you said it earlier, like a polo shirt combat warrior. And you have to recognize that the polo shirt or a dress shirt was a requirement on certain contracts from the Department of State so that you looked a little bit more professional, because if not, you would get some guys out there in tank tops, like just, I got rid of the uniform, I can wear whatever I want. And those are the types of people that did not get selected for the ambassador security detail. And so there was an image. And so you have to tell people you can either wear a t-shirt, you can wear a long sleeve, short sleeve, tank top, or collared shirt. What looks most professional? Like once you come back on base and take your body armor off, you're in a polo shirt and pants walking around. Like you're just another person there. If you want to change your polo shirt, put on a t-shirt before you go outside the wire, hey man, that's on you. Whatever's, less, as long as it's not too fire, it doesn't catch fire easily, like wear that shirt. Um, so initially my thought was this is phenomenal. We as private military contractors could execute missions with less red tape. We weren't circumventing, in my eyes, we weren't circumventing things. We just, our leadership chain of command was much shorter than the military's. And so we were allowed to respond much faster. And I find that obviously valuable for various reasons. Over the
Yeah,
years
absolutely. I
of
think I think you hit it real quick there with I always like to touch on things that I don't think people and maybe my audience doesn't understand is that especially in that time frame that you're talking about, which we're talking about like 2005 to 2010 time frame, right? Private military contracts operated much like a military unit. Now they had guardrails in place. They operated doing a lot of the same jobs that your military in personnel would do, trying to take that burden off of a lot of the military personnel. And so what you said is exactly my experience in that you were able to move quicker and faster and less bureaucratic. And so you became the group that was looked to actually take on certain operations. And I talked about this to you before we started recording. Like I think maybe we crossed paths before because yeah, we were doing IED clearing and Blackwater did some of our IED clearing.
it's you know the local army guys and the Marines inside of their Humvees on the tactical commander front right seat, he had our call sign taped up there. And I started seeing it over and over. And I finally asked them about it. And they said, if we get into a serious firefight, you, Blackwater, are one of the first people we're contacting. And I said, why? They said, you guys will come right away. There's no question about it. You'll just, yep, Roger, we're on our way. We're a big military. It's got to get filtered up the chain of command to most likely somebody sitting in a desk on a lot of Zoom meetings back in America going, oh, I'm sorry, what's going on? Where's my tea at? Not to be disrespectful to them, but that's their environment. They're in an office behind desks, or they're reaching all the way back to JSOC to get command authority for boots on the ground. And so I really loved that at the moment that, hey, we could respond. But there was always an issue that I had, and I had heard some other teammates of mine that were talking about going out somewhere in the city unnecessarily. I said, don't do that. That's a stupid risk that you don't need to take on, because then you put us at risk if you get in a firefight. And they just thought it was a little bit cowboyish and look at us, we're rolling out. And I said, my man, you're not in the military anymore. You go put that helicopter down on that ground and get off of it, you start getting attacked, nobody's coming. There's no C-130 gunship overhead. There's no ISR drones. We've got a very small QRF contingency team, and I mean small, quite capable, but small. You call big army to come in, they're going to come in with a lot of assistance. And that's in the military ConOps planning. The private military contractors, you don't have that ecosystem of infrastructure. And so over the years and pretty recently that I've been thinking about this, I think there's a place for private military contractors to do certain type of roles, but you have to be cognizant of it. If it is because it reduces the length of the chain of command, reduces some bureaucracy and red tape, I'm starting to believe that we should fix that in our military, and we should be able to let our special forces operators do their job. And we saw this with Biden and Obama. Like a lot of SF dudes were just getting out and said, "Mate, they got our hands tied behind their back. You are the tool set that needs to do this job, and they're not letting you do it." And that's a problem. So if we can restructure our military to be more efficient, then the military should be able to handle those missions, and PMCs handle a little bit of other missions, because you don't want to cross the line of, despite Geneva Conventions and rules of engagement, it comes down to a humanity of morals and ethics. Like just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean I should pull that trigger. Like there better be a good reason to pull that trigger. And unfortunately, it's kind of romanticized around social media. And those of us that have been there, it's not a pretty thing. Like it's necessary at times, but I think we need to take more accountability and ownership in doing those type of lethal actions.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about anyone who's put on the uniform for any number of years understands exactly what you're talking about with the bureaucracy, right? We kind of, I think, within the civilian world, we have a large swath of people who think the military is how it's displayed in Hollywood, where oh, if a helo goes down, they're just gonna rush in hundreds of U.S. service members to pull out this helo, and they don't understand like it's going to take time, and they're going to go through different courses of action before an actual decision is put in place. And I know now there are companies who are working to shorten that decision making time frame in a much more automated sense here, while keeping the human in the loop. And so we're trying to pull away from that. But like you said, the more the more burden you put on a military person who is in a combat zone, the more likely it is going to be that they'll do one of two things, and both things are very dangerous. The first thing is to overreact to a situation, thus firing upon maybe someone who is innocent. And the second thing that's just as dangerous is hesitating. I think you've talked about this before in other podcasts, in that how hesitation is a life killer. And I kind of joke with my family as well, as we're like walking around, and somebody hesitates, and I always say, if you hesitate, you die. And so don't make that hesitation, make your decision and move. And I just kind of talking that through and just seeing what your thoughts are on that.
I have another term for hesitation as well, that we were ingrained, like particularly coming through a doorway. Don't hesitate in doorways. Like, right? It was ingrained into you that hesitation kills. When I really started to analyze high pressure decision making skill sets, hesitation can be a tool if used properly. And you'll understand this by when you said, make a decision. Before that decision is made, there's awareness, there's orientation, there's observations, there's other frameworks being implemented to get to that decision. Somebody on the outside watching you might think that you've hesitated for a second, but you're actually actively doing something before you make what we would consider to be a decision based off urgency and speed, which has not been vetted by judgment, decision making, and logic. Like it's just it becomes a reaction at that point. And I don't want people to just react. As you said, you've got to have that decision pre-made, predetermined. If this happens, then I will do this. And then that allows you, when that event does happen, you already know what you're going to do. You're, of course, assessing real-time information, and you may deviate. And if you start down the wrong path, at least you're moving. continue to assess, continue to orientate, and update that decision in real time. And we see a lot of, even in the corporate world, we see so many decisions that are made out of urgency and speed. Like I made the decision super fast, I'm good. And you're like, you did not think that through. I see all the errors, and that's one of the things, like particularly at bomb disposal, that made me pretty good at it, was I can see the potentials already starting to form, and they're either diverging or converging. And we call those second and third order effects. Like you may get a decision made or a reaction made, and that solves your first problem. We call that first order. But there's a second order and a third order and a fourth order, and you better be thinking two or three steps ahead.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. That's why you train like you fight, right? Is so that it's ingrained in you, and so what
Mhm.
may look like, what may one look like hesitation. Some people may see you and look like you are reacting too quickly, but you're reacting at the same time. And I want to stick to this decision making process that you brought up here because we both operated in places where if you're wrong, people are dying. So being wrong isn't an option. Then was there any like
Generally
specific
not.
moment? What's that?
Generally not. Don't be wrong.
Yeah, don't be wrong. But was there any like specific moment or maybe a mission that kind of codified what you were just talking about in like your approach to decision making?
Um, there's not a lot that, stand out that, and this is kind of sad to say, is that it just becomes day-to-day life. Somebody else sees, you're constantly at threat, you're constantly at roadside bombs, you're constantly getting shot at, like it's chaotic. You kind of just go, it's just a job. And so our decision-making framework didn't start by having this aha moment in real life combat. That's a series of evolutions that are all the way dated back to your initial training. And like you don't realize it in training. Do you remember do you ever go to like any dive training?
Yeah, we had someone on Panelleria out in Italy.
Okay, so in the dive class, one of the big things they always say is attention to detail, follow your procedures, attention to detail. And in some of our pool activities, if we were getting hit with scuba tanks on, after a certain evolution, you could recover your gear, and you had to go through a particular procedure to recover your gear. If you needed air from a teammate, you had to do a very specific procedure. Now, if there was four steps critical steps you needed to make, if you were out here working on your car, you might be able to do one, three, two, and then four. And that would be acceptable in your home. But they were training you to follow your procedure for a reason. And initial years, I thought, wow, I've got to do this by the steps. And over time, being in the water and operating, going, mate, I'm getting this step first, and then I'll take care of these other steps. And I started to realize the reason for the training. It not only was it making me a competent diver, they were pressure testing me, being submerged in a pool, no oxygen, being beaten on for a couple of seconds. That's the pressure that they're inducing in that given evolution. They're always looking to make sure you're following the procedures and not reacting emotionally. So remove the emotion, like separate it. You can deal with emotion later. Follow your procedures. And our procedures is to slow the environment down, prioritize judgment on your decision making over speed and urgency. And then the final one, you delay any action that is not recoverable from for as long as humanly possible. So as long as I can keep making logical, rational, sound decisions, I can keep moving forward and assessing new information, which will dictate my next decision. If I make that final decision that I can't recover from, like disarming a bomb, do I want to cut this wire? mate, there's potential if I cut that wire, it detonates, I die. I'm not recovering from that. So let me delay that decision while I gather and assess and figure out a way to keep delaying that. There's got to be another option until there's not. And then how do I risk mitigate against that one last single option? And you see too many people that react to a decision and then they're tunnel vision down. They don't want to change left or right or pause. And it just snowballs. And they've made an irreversible decision. They've burnt the bridge, they burnt the relationship. Very difficult to recover from.
Yeah, and I think what you did there that's very interesting is something that I'm sure you guys did. I know we did when I was in uniform, and you just discuss this in a very like scientific or technical way, and if you were to discuss it in this way, would be like, that sounds extremely mundane and boring. And we always talked about that in uniform of like, you're jumping out of planes, you're diving, you're shooting rounds down range. The military can make anything the most boring thing in the world, and that's the purpose for it. um, because it's boring because it's ingrained and you're just going step by step. Because what we've learned, and what I have learned throughout my career, is that it's the same thing that Mike Tyson said, right? Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth, right? You have a plan, and if you're not training like you're fighting, the moment chaos ensues, you're going to revert back to what you know. And if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to die. And so I think that was such a great way that you kind of maneuvered the conversation around like these step one, step two, step three. This is what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Super fascinating.
Yeah, when you learn enough about any given procedure, you understand what you can and cannot violate. Like, for example, little bird helicopters, flying on those. One of the pilots one day, where we'd been doing regular missions, support missions, and then we were going to do a QRF mission. And I asked him, normally, I don't say the technical numbers, but normally a couple of minutes to for him to get in his seat, do his checklist, spin it up, get confirmation that we're on board, and go wheels up or skids up for him. He said for QRF, don't muck around. You step on that aircraft, you tap me, 30 seconds, we're airborne. I was like, oh, you're skipping a few steps, huh? And he goes, yeah, check this out. And he shows me his flight checklist. He goes, and he's got the ones that are must highlighted. He goes, I can technically skip all these other ones just to get ourselves airborne and on route. And then I got to play catch up. So I need my co pilot to help play catch up while I'm flying the mission. And I said, oh, that's fascinating. We do this as well. Like, which steps can I skip that aren't 100% critical, but I better come back and follow up with them? And so, over the pressure testing months, years, decades of experience, you really start to learn those things. And I'm trying to develop a framework that we can teach to everyday people. Like, this is how we thought. Now it's your job to slow down in your everyday life and execute that framework. And if you want to pressure test yourself, may reach out to us. We'll put you in some training to where you have to execute those frameworks, but we'll do the external pressure for you. And that's what military training was. Of course, giving you tactics and procedures, but they're constantly pressure testing you. And you remember, day one of training seemed chaotic. Day 180, you're graduating. If you went back to day one, you'd be sitting there chilling out. Everybody else would be freaking out, but that wasn't your experience on day one. And so we developed this pressure test. I think we call it uh, stress inoculation, like over time, over scenarios. But it all comes back to your ability to remain calm, keep clarity under any type of stressful situation, whether you're cold, tired, hot, sweaty, getting shot at. That's just the external environment. You still need to mentally function without having emotion.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is why we continue to, as I keep saying, train as you fight, because once it's ingrained, you're just going to do it. And I think it's interesting you brought up the QRF there because they do kind of opt the QRF, quick reactionary force. They have to be quick, and so him saying he's going to keep I'm going to skip a few steps, but we're still going to get there, and that's how he had trained to be a QRF. But when you do those kind of things, and I'm going to kind of flip this conversation a little bit, but when you do those kind of things and something happens, there's a mishap, and then you know something happens and it's brought into the public sphere and the news, and you get a lot of people who will go, oh, this must not have happened because if it really happened, a pilot would have gone and done this and this. They wouldn't have skipped that. And I've saw this in like if you remember recently, the was the fighter jet was that went down in Iran, and we had two missing pilots. One was quickly recovered, and the other had to run up a mountain. And from my perspective, as somebody who's done that training and been a part of that career field, um, they did everything the right way, to include when mishaps happened and they destroyed equipment. You know, that's the training. That's everything. But it brought on these like wild conspiracy theories that it didn't happen, and we're living in this time of 24/7, like literally 24/7 news cycles, because everyone is perpetually online and on social media. We just get this fog of war that's continuous now, right? The Russian invasion of Ukraine happened live on Twitter. Strikes in Iran happened live on various screens monitoring the situation. So how, like, just asking this, like, how do we move on as a society from that?
The issue is, when you said 24/7 screen availability of information, it's just information. You've got to go determine, you got to vet that information, vet the source. Is it truthful information? Is it factual information? Is it misinformation? I can probably, with a high level assessment, say there was some purposeful misinformation being delivered throughout Iran during his rescue, right? For
Yep.
our tactical benefit. So we already know we use misinformation. So does everybody else. So when I see all these things on the news, back in COVID, there was these images of dead bodies on the ground and people in white suits, yellow masks. Some reporter or journalist pulled up that picture and was like, hey, that's a photograph from like 6 years ago from some other outbreak. And they're using that image and talking the headline of COVID. And so are they trying to intently lie to you? Or was it just, hey, I've got a picture of this. It paints the picture, put it in there. But then some, I won't say uneducated person, but some person that's not educated in our backgrounds will look at that and naturally associate it and go, oh my God, this is really what's happening. I don't want it to happen in my community. So I'm going to rat out my neighbor who's not following the mandate. And you go, like, this is out of control. So, how do you solve that problem? If you're going to provide information to a society, there should be a guideline of, hey, we'll tell you about fiscal policy, about this policy, but these other things, ask all the questions, we're not going to tell you. And a lot of people don't like that. We understand why that is necessary at times, but okay, I'll accept that. It's just too manipulated. There's too many people running social media and news outlets that don't vet their information, or they're being instructed on what to deliver as information. I've got a friend of mine over via 1 degree away in Moscow. When they watch the news, Fox News over there, it is completely different storyline than what's here in the US. And go to China or Korea and look at their news. It is completely different. And so now you have two or three or four independent cultures that are being raised in the same era, but with completely different life and historical accounts. And you go, man, how are those groups of people in 3 decades going to communicate effectively? Because their backgrounds, one of them has been lied to or manipulated, or both of them have. And I think we got to start there. Would be a really good starting point. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, and what I would say is like the scariest thing to me, and I am a free speech absolutist. You can say what you want. You want to spread misinformation and get your follower count up. To me, that's fine. But the scary thing is that uh, public policy and the policies that this country has is very much affected by public perception and public outrage. And so you talk about like Russia and China and North Korea and how they handle the news and state-run media. If I always talk about this, the possibility, the military still plans for this possibility of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan and doing large scale combat operations in the Indo-Pacific. What is that going to look like from a public perception, from public sentiment in the United States as opposed to China? And how is that going to change the perspective of the government and the military that is carrying out those combat operations?
Well, from the 70s, born in 1975, I can recall as a 5-year-old hearing my grandparents talk about China, dad talk about China, uncles talk about China. Like it's been going on for decades. China has been very open and adamant that they will recover Taiwan. It's not maybe we will do it. Like their presidential office, it's openly communicated. We will go back and retake Taiwan, or give Taiwan an option to self-declare back to us. So I don't think it's a question of if it's ever going to happen. I think it's when it's going to happen. And to your question, I think most Americans will probably just go, there'll be two primary groups. One will go, great, America in another war that we shouldn't be involved in. And then there will be those people with similar upbringings like myself that heard about China, almost like you were indoctrinated to expect it, that you would go, oh, okay, fight's on. Like we've been waiting for this one. And China's view is just, we're going to go take Taiwan and whatever's in our way, well, we'll deal with that. And people don't understand this isn't just about a little island. It's about the strategic value and importance of that land space, and then the technological capability that particularly their chip manufacturers have as an infrastructure. And so there is a massive push to either relocate or build those at multiple places around the world besides Taiwan. But strategically and technologically, they're going to go and try and take that place back. And we're not necessarily as Americans not only trying to defend the Taiwanese people, we're trying to prevent something much greater than just people, like just the people of Taiwan. Like it will affect the globe. And so I don't say somebody has to, but somebody should, maintain a checks and balance. And I kind of see that's what the US is trying to do is maintain that peaceful balance. You stay on your side of the water, Taiwan will stay on their side of the water. And if you poke them, we're going to get involved.
So you see
And I
it completely, like the public perception completely different than what we're seeing right now with Iran, right? There's a ton of commentary that is completely, even coming from the administration's own voting base, that is completely against what is currently happening in Iran.
Yeah, it goes back to the military 101 doctrine. What's my objective? If my objective is X, well, how do I obtain X at the lowest level of violence or non-violence that I can. And then it goes through its escalation phases and it ends in end of life. We'll just terminate you. And so we've gotten to that point where we're now in, active arms. But what's our objective? If our objective was to deplete their infrastructure, okay, which infrastructure? Okay, have we done it? No, keep bombing it. Okay, so meet these objectives to get your outcome. And I don't think our objectives have been clearly communicated, at least to the public, because, hey, we went in there and we dropped 5,000 Tomahawk missiles as well as a bunch of other stuff. And you're going, oh, man, you've seen what a Tomahawk does. Like, that is a lot of firepower, accurate firepower. And you said we've destroyed all of their naval capability. Yet every day I wake up, there's some report about a fight. There's some report about they're still actively laying mines. Like, didn't you just say the other day that we destroyed their capability? So define their capability. Like, tell me the truth. Like, if we're still actively engaged, hey, just keep going. But what's the objective? Iraq, Afghanistan for 20 years. I think they said within the first 2 to 3 months, we completed our objective. And 20 years later, we're still there. Like, what was the objective? An entire
Yeah,
generation. Go ahead.
sorry, I was just saying that that was always the point that I brought up because at the time President Bush, this is Iraq, right? And George W. Bush went on the aircraft carrier and had that huge mission accomplished banner that went up there, right?
Yeah.
And everyone laughed at him. And I said, no, the mission was accomplished. The problem was we stayed for 20 more years in a country that is fractured, that Iran has brought in proxies to attack U.S. forces. That was the problem in
Yeah.
that timeline.
Yeah. And you bring up, you say Iraq and Afghanistan, then you mention Iran. Where's Iran situated? Between Iraq and
Yeah.
Afghanistan, and we were there for 20 years. I think the history with Iran goes at least further back than that of China. If we really wanted to smack them around, we basically sandwiched them. Like, this is our opportunity, right? You're talking about fog of war earlier. One of the issues with fog of war is you're analyzing the capability and the intent of and the opportunity. Like, just because a country has the capability and intent to do something, if they don't have the opportunity or make the opportunity, they're a little bit lower on the threat matrix. And so being surrounding that country for decades, like, they say death to America. Like, there is a part of their society, not their whole society, that truly indoctrinated and believed that. And we knew, as you said, we had Iranian leadership coming over, training Iraqis and Afghanistan's. EFPs was a big one. I mean, that's when the spike in
Mhm.
EFPs is when I think it was some Hezbollah members came over and IRGs. We know they're there, so why not go smack them? We've got them surrounded. We got boats in the Gulf. Like, let's just do this now. That was an opportunity time. We had the capability. We knew what their intent was. So why not exercise it then? A couple of years later, here we are, and now we're trying to, piecemeal something together. What's the end state of Iran? And oh, by the way, hasn't Venezuela fallen off the news?
Yeah.
Like, what's
Yeah.
going on down there?
What's the end state? Absolutely. I think this is a legitimate issue with what is going on around the world and why it seems so chaotic. Because the messaging is chaotic. It's, hey,
Very much
we
so.
deposed this dictator. Okay, why? Well, is it regime change? Because the regime didn't change.
Mhm.
There's that regime still exists in Venezuela. In Iran, regime change didn't happen because the IRGC still holds the power there.
Mhm. Yeah, we're definitely never going to, well, we're definitely not receiving all the information, and I'm okay with that.
Mhm.
So I try to look at all the various news things for a few minutes a day and try to piece together, read between the lines, and then, say some prayers for the people, both in Iran and both of our forces and our NATO forces around the world. Like, be safe. Like, I understand what it's like. We're all trying to do, at an individual level, raise our families, support our communities, and we're deployed somewhere because we volunteered to do that. But the manipulation and the lying to and the dragging out of decades of unnecessary and then immediately pulling out, like that's just a slap in the face, man. Like that's the tough
Yeah.
pill to swallow.
And it feels like they hesitated. It feels like hesitation in all of this, where you could,
So you
cut the head.
you're right. What would make politicians hesitate? If you don't have a clear, defined, obtainable, quantifiable objective, what do we do next? We smack 20 tanks. We smack 20 of their naval vessels. Excellent. I five around the room. What do we do next? That tells me you don't really have a start to finish in game plan. And that should have never occurred. You should have never started if you didn't have that objective clearly laid out. And then you don't have to hesitate. Remember at the beginning of the conversation, we said, make your decisions now so that when the event happens, you already know what you're prepared and going to do.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I'm not going to disagree with anything you said there. I do wish there was better messaging, and like you said, and I come from the intelligence community, so obviously I'm going to say everyone doesn't need to know everything. But I also believe that we don't need to we don't need to see these wars happen in real time. We don't need to see conflict in real time. We don't need access at the tip of our fingers, but we do need to keep advancing technologically, right? Look at the war in Ukraine and what that's done for unmanned aerial vehicles. Look at what's going on with uncrewed surface vessels, with China using these. So we still need to advance technologically,
Absolutely.
but
Absolutely.
how do we pull back from ourselves technologically?
Oh, if you figure that answer out, let me know. It's
I'm trying.
when we say pull back, we could categorize it as in use case, right? So maybe I use technology for efficiency and for redundancy and for safety to allow myself time to physically be a human being with my family and community, not advanced technology to find new ways to kill people. There's enough of those already around. And so, yes, we have to keep pace. Like in the EOD world, we call it cat and mouse game. The enemy develops this, we create a tactic. They learn our tactic, they do it again. And we just keep going back and forth. And that's how, technology advancement, and you said it, you see it in Ukraine and over in China. So, yes, if we're going to be due diligence and protect ourselves, we have to keep advancing technology. However, I don't think, with the exception of a few use cases of AI, to assimilate certain types of vetted data or real time censored data to process after a human being, it's the fight will be over before they get a decision made. So yes, use technology for processing of information, but don't use it for decision making when lives are at stake. That still comes down to a moral and ethical decision. Again, back to I have the authority to do it. Does the current situation dictate that I truly need to do it? Because you're not coming back from that.
Yeah, you're not. And there's this dichotomy that you just brought up. This dichotomy that we are more connected than ever before. Like we are in, as far as like advanced, we are more advanced than we ever were before, and we are the most disconnected. Like people do not have conversations in person anymore. And the conversations
Disconnected
that they do have are about Twitter and Instagram, and we're constantly on our phones and constantly using
Talking
um
with our thumbs.
yes, talking with our thumbs.
So this
And we're
this
not
is why I like the
living
podcast.
right.
Have
We're having a
conversations.
conversation. Yes. We're not picking up phones. Yeah, it is happening because technology gave us that ability to do it.
Mhm. Yeah.
But we're using it to have a face-to-face conversation. And the great thing about technology is that Trevor, I we probably would have never met without technology, right?
100%.
We're in totally different places having a
Yep.
conversation at totally at the same time but totally different time zones, and those are the great things. And this was something that I thought about during or yeah, I thought about during the you talked about COVID, and we were locked down, and there were these conversations of like, oh, we're never gonna have interactions again, right? We're never gonna go out in public. And I always said that's not true. Like, you cannot make a business deal over a Zoom call. You might be able to, but not in the way that you want to. Like, and
Oh,
you're not going to be able to engage with people unless you sit down across from the table with them and have that
conversation.
conversation.
One of the most disgusting things for me to see is a family at a restaurant, husband, wife, two children on their phone, heads down. Like the rule in my house, I better not see a phone at my kitchen table when we're having dinner. And it's not a threat. We teach it to the children properly to where this is our family time. We're going to make food together. We're going to eat together. We're going to have conversations. You can have your IT time later or before, but this is family time. And not a lot of people actually purposely, intentfully have that, maintain that human connection unless it's on a phone.
Yeah, and I do think, and I'm kind of seeing this in the generation that is coming up right now. And you know, we always talk down about generations that come after us, but I'm starting to see in these in reports of like in schools, kids are actually wanting to have their phones taken away from them so that they can
It's
actually
learn.
learn.
Yeah, it's a distraction.
It is every
Yeah.
time it buzzes, you know, you want to pick it up. There's that, what is it, phantom phone? Um,
Mhm.
you leave your phone on a table and your pocket is buzzing
Vibrates.
because you yeah.
Happens to me all the time. I like, which pocket do I check? And for some reason, my left butt cheek always vibrates. I'm like, where's that freaking phone at? Yeah, it's crazy. Leave those things away as far
Well,
as I can at times.
yeah, I think so, and I hope we are on a trajectory where the that becomes part of our life where we get back to. I appreciate what you do with your family, and
Thank
I
you.
also appreciate you coming on here and talking to
Appreciate it,
us
man. I
as we
appreciate it.
wrap up.
I
But
think we
I
have
always
like,
like to wrap up and have you just promote whatever you're doing, or just you know tell the people what you
yeah,
want them to hear.
yeah. So if we've got a little spy quiz over at Everyday Spy, if you go to everydayspy.com, look on the spy quiz. I think it's only like 10 questions, a couple of minutes. It'll kind of direct you to some courses that we have that would probably be of interest to someone. And it's really just based upon learning yourself, your personality, how to read other people's personalities so that we can better communicate together as opposed to me trying to be egotistically and get what I want from you and reduce this power thing and have conversations. And then we've got a few courses on preparedness and judgment that are coming up within the next couple of months. So if you're interested in this conversation on how we as operators make logical, rational decisions, keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, I absolutely love everything Everyday Spy is doing. I've actually taken the quiz and got my my personality there. But what I really like is this framing. We see the agency and spy as trying to get something out of people, manipulate people. And I think
Yeah.
you and Andrew and the team have kind of flipped that on its head and said it's not
Yep.
about manipulating people. It's about manipulating yourself for the better.
With that, start with that. It's always way more valuable to have a mutually beneficial agreement with someone as opposed to putting a gun to their head and threatening them, like at the one time deal. But if we can have a good working relationship, cool, this is going to last for decades. So yeah, starts with learning about yourself.
Absolutely. And Trevor, we need more people like you in the world. And so
Appreciate that. Thank you.
keep speaking out. So I really appreciated this conversation. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.